In this podcast episode, Ben Shapiro delves into the ongoing narrative perpetuated by Democrats and the media that labels Donald Trump as a Nazi. He argues that this myth, pushed by the Biden team and mainstream media, lacks substantial evidence. Shapiro highlights the internal division within the Democratic Party, noting that some members are openly anti-Semitic while others are not. He criticizes the Biden administration's handling of international relations, particularly with Israel, accusing it of being lenient towards anti-Semitic groups like Hamas and making unfounded claims about Israel committing war crimes. Shapiro then explores the principles dominating modern leftism, which he describes as a mix of libertarianism, the belief that individuals are defined by their feelings, and the idea that systemic issues are the root cause of all failures. He argues that this combination has led to a power game where leftist elites use global warming as a pretext to restructure the economy. Shapiro criticizes the Biden administration's focus on climate and clean energy, suggesting it is a guise for imposing a leftist ideology centered on equity, diversity, inclusion, and social justice. He points to global organizations like the World Economic Forum pushing for a complete overhaul of the global economy in the name of these ideals. The podcast also touches on recent events, such as the United Nations honoring the Iranian president, a New York Times reporter discouraging interviews with Iranian dissidents, and the Harvard faculty voting to allow students involved in protests to graduate. Shapiro condemns these actions as examples of the left's willingness to support oppressive regimes and silence dissenting voices in the name of their ideology. Shapiro emphasizes that online platforms like Facebook and TikTok do not reflect real life, asserting that the majority of people still value traditional institutions and values. He discusses how normies, who prioritize tradition, family, and free markets, are pushing back against the left's narrative and values. He argues that this silent majority is gaining momentum in rejecting transgressive values. The discussion shifts to Europe, where Shapiro highlights the hypocrisy of European countries paying North African nations to detain and dump migrants in remote areas to deter them from seeking asylum in Europe. He criticizes the EU for supporting these practices while condemning human rights abuses elsewhere. Shapiro argues that civilizations have the right to protect themselves from those who do not share their values, citing examples of violence and crime in Sweden and Finland linked to increased immigration. Shapiro also addresses the Israel-Gaza conflict, contrasting Israel, a successful liberal democracy, with Hamas, a terrorist group seeking to destroy it. He criticizes the international left for sympathizing with Hamas and underscores the importance of defending traditional values and institutions. The podcast delves into generational differences, with Shapiro discussing a poll that shows baby boomers valuing patriotism, religion, and family more than Generation Z. He expresses concern over the younger generation's favorable views of socialism and Palestine, emphasizing the need for a strong defense of traditional values to counter the influence of left-wing ideologies. Throughout the episode, Shapiro consistently critiques the left's approach to various issues, from international relations and climate policy to social justice and immigration. He argues that the left's ideology is fundamentally flawed, and that a return to traditional values is necessary to counter its influence.